When my son died, I got 50 Manellers. His ex demanded a share, but I stood firm. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, cutting through the silence of my suburban Chicago home like a knife through flesh. After 35 years of marriage to Margaret, I'd learned that calls at this hour never brought good news, but nothing could have prepared me for Detective Rodriguez's voice on the other end. "Mr. Harrison? This is Detective Maria Rodriguez with the LAPD. I'm calling about your son, Michael Harrison." My blood turned to ice. Mike was 28, living his dream as a tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. Last we'd spoken, just 3 days prior, he was excited about some new venture capital meeting. He sounded so alive, so full of possibilities. "There's been an accident, sir. A car collision on Highway 101. I'm very sorry to inform you that your son didn't survive." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I must have made some sound, a gasp, a cry, something, because Margaret was suddenly beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that only a mother can know. "We'll need you to come to Los Angeles to identify the body and handle his affairs," the detective continued, her voice professionally gentle but matter-of-fact, in that way only cops and doctors master. I barely remember the next few hours. Margaret made the arrangements while I sat in my leather recliner, the one Mike had bought me for Father's Day 2 years ago, staring at nothing. Our neighbors, the Kowalskis, brought over a casserole. The Johnsons from down the street sent flowers. It was all very suburban, very Midwestern, very normal, except nothing would ever be normal again. We flew to Los Angeles the next morning. The city sprawled endlessly beneath our plane, a maze of freeways and strip malls and palm trees that seemed impossibly foreign to our Illinois sensibilities. Mike had always loved it here, the energy, the opportunities, the dreamers and schemers, all chasing their piece of the American dream. The coroner's office was everything you'd expect from a government building in LA. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, and the subtle smell of disinfectant that couldn't quite mask something more unsettling. When they pulled back the sheet, I saw my boy's face, peaceful but wrong somehow. Death had taken the spark from his eyes, the quick smile that could light up a room. Margaret broke down. 35 years of marriage, and I'd never heard her cry like that. Raw, primal, the sound of a mother's heart breaking. I held her while mine shattered silently inside my chest. Chapter 2. The Reading of the Will. 3 weeks later, we found ourselves in the sleek downtown office of Hartman, Pierce & Associates, Mike's attorney. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed success and billable hours. Everything about it felt alien to a guy who'd spent 40 years selling farm equipment in DeKalb County. James Hartman was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of practiced sympathy that probably served him well in probate law. His office overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sprawl that had been Mike's adopted home. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison," he began, settling behind his mahogany desk with a thick folder. "First, let me express my deepest condolences. Michael was not just a client, he was a friend. His loss is felt deeply by everyone who knew him." Margaret clutched my hand. We'd buried our son a week ago in the family plot back in Illinois, next to my father and grandfather. 3 generations of Harrison men, now reunited in death. As you know, Michael was incredibly successful with his startup, TechFlow Solutions. The company was acquired by Google just 6 months ago for $85 million. After taxes and various obligations, Michael's personal estate is valued at approximately $52 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. $52 million. I'd never even seen $1 million, let alone 52 of them. Mike had been doing well. We knew that. But this was beyond anything we'd imagined. "The bulk of the estate," Hartman continued, "goes to you, his parents, per the will he updated after the acquisition. There are also provisions for his favorite charities and his alma mater, Northwestern University. Margaret and I exchanged glances. We'd raised Mike to be generous, to remember where he came from. Even in death, he was taking care of others. However, Hartman's tone shifted slightly, there's something you should know. Michael's ex-fiancée, Sophia Chen, has contacted our office. She's claiming a right to a portion of the estate. My stomach dropped. Sophia. We'd met her twice. Once at Christmas 2 years ago and again at Mike's college reunion last spring. She was beautiful, ambitious, everything Mike had been attracted to. They'd been engaged for 8 months before calling it off in what Mike had described as mutual differences about the future. On what grounds? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. She claims they had a verbal agreement about sharing the proceeds from the TechFlow acquisition. She also alleges that some of the company's early development happened while they were living together, making her entitled to community property-style compensation. The words community property made my jaw clench. Mike had worked 18-hour days for years building that company. I'd watched him sacrifice his social life, his health, even his relationship with Sophia, all for the dream of making it big in Silicon Valley. California is a community property state, Hartman explained, but they were never married. Still, she might try to establish a claim under palimony laws or as a business partner. Margaret found her voice for the first time since we'd sat down. Business partner? She was a marketing consultant. Mike always said she didn't understand the technical side. That may be true, Mrs. Harrison, but these cases can be complicated. The fact that they lived together during some of the crucial development period could work in her favor. And honestly, $52 million is enough money to motivate aggressive litigation. I thought about Mike's last visit home just 2 months ago. He'd been reflective, talking about his regrets. Dad, he'd said, sitting on our back porch with a beer, watching the corn sway in the evening breeze. I thought Sophia and I wanted the same things, but she saw dollar signs where I saw innovation. When TechFlow started taking off, she changed. Or maybe I just finally saw who she really was. Now she wanted her share of those dollar signs. Chapter 3. The First Encounter. Sophia called me directly 3 days after the will reading. I was in my workshop trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of restoring a 1967 John Deere tractor, something solid and mechanical that made sense in a world that suddenly didn't. Mr. Harrison, this is Sophia Chen. I'm sorry for your loss. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, crisp, professional, with just a hint of the California accent she'd picked up since moving west from her native Texas. Thank you, I said, setting down my wrench. What can I do for you? I think you know why I'm calling. I hope we can handle this amicably, without lawyers getting too involved. The presumption in her voice set my teeth on edge. Without lawyers? She'd already contacted Mike's attorney. Mike left everything to his family, I said carefully. That seems pretty straightforward to me. Mr. Harrison, I loved your son. I spent 3 years of my life building a future with him. The company that made all this money possible? I was there from the beginning. I helped with the marketing strategy, the investor presentations, the company Mike built with his own hands and his own mind, I interrupted. The company he worked on 18 hours a day while you complained he didn't spend enough time with you. There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge. I see you've already made up your mind. That's unfortunate. I was hoping we could reach an understanding. I understand plenty. Mike broke up with you because you cared more about his success than you cared about him. That's not true, and you know it. We broke up because he became obsessed with work. But that work, that success, I was part of it. I deserve to be compensated for my contributions. I looked out the workshop window at the cornfield beyond our property line. 3 generations of Harrisons had worked this land before Mike decided to chase dreams in California. We understood the value of hard work, of earning what you got. Mike's gone, I said finally. The money won't bring him back, but it's his legacy, and he left it to the people he chose to leave it to. This isn't over, Mr. Harrison. The line went dead. Chapter 4. Digging into the past. That evening, I called Mike's college roommate, David Park, who'd stayed close to Mike throughout the years. David was a software engineer at Apple now, one of those brilliant Korean-American kids who'd made good in Silicon Valley. He'd been at the funeral, of course, but we hadn't had a chance to really talk. Mr. Harrison, how are you holding up? David's concern was genuine. He'd spent countless weekends at our house during college, becoming like a second son to us. I've been better. David, I need to ask you about Sophia Chen. A long pause. What about her? She's claiming she's entitled to part of Mike's estate, says she helped build the company. David sighed heavily. Man, I was hoping this wouldn't come up. Look, Mr. Harrison, Sophia, she's complicated. She definitely helped Mike in the early days. Networking, marketing advice, connections through her family's business contacts. Her father owns a chain of electronics stores in Texas, and she knows the business world. My heart sank a little. So she might have a legitimate claim? Legitimate? I don't know about that, but she wasn't just along for the ride either. The thing is, Mike changed after TechFlow started getting serious investor interest. He became paranoid about protecting his intellectual property, about people trying to take advantage of him. He specifically had lawyers draw up agreements with everyone who'd been involved early on, except Sophia. Why not her? Because they were engaged. He trusted her completely, said they were going to be married anyway, so what was his would be hers and vice versa. It was romantic and stupid and very Mike. I rubbed my temples. But they broke up before the acquisition. Yeah, and that's where it gets messy. Sophia wanted him to put her name on official company documents as a co-founder. Mike refused, said she'd never been an actual co-founder, just a supportive girlfriend who'd given advice. That's when things got ugly between them. How ugly? She accused him of using her, of stealing her ideas. Mike was devastated. He really loved her, Mr. Harrison. But he also felt like she was trying to rewrite history, to claim credit for work she hadn't done. The last few months of their relationship were basically one long argument about money and recognition. I thought about Mike's last visit home, his quiet sadness when we'd asked about Sophia. He just said, "Some people change when money gets involved, Dad. You find out what they really value." David, in your honest opinion, does she deserve anything? Another pause. She helped him, Mr. Harrison, but Mike did the work. Mike had the vision. Mike took the risks. Sophia, she was smart and supportive, but she was also calculating. I think she saw Mike's potential and positioned herself to benefit from it. When it came time to make it official, she wanted credit she hadn't earned. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the American dream, the idea that if you work hard enough, smart enough, you can build something from nothing. Mike had lived that dream. He'd gone from a farm kid in Illinois to a Silicon Valley success story. But somewhere along the way, that dream had gotten tangled up with people who saw opportunity where they should have seen love. Chapter 5. The Lawyer's Office. Sophia's attorney was everything I'd expected from watching too many movies about Los Angeles lawyers. Bradford Sinclair had an office in Century City, dressed in suits that probably cost more than my truck, and spoke in the kind of measured tones that probably billed at $800 an hour. Margaret and I sat across from him and Sophia in a conference room with a view of the Pacific Ocean. Sophia looked different than I remembered. Thinner, more severe, dressed in a black business suit that seemed designed to convey both mourning and professionalism. "Let's cut to the chase," Sinclair began, sliding a folder across the polished table. "My client has a legitimate claim to a portion of Michael Harrison's estate based on her contributions to TechFlow Solutions during their relationship." I picked up the folder but didn't open it. Mike never mentioned any business partnership with Sophia. "Not a formal partnership, no," Sinclair conceded. but California recognizes various forms of implied agreements and quantum meruit claims. Ms. Chen provided substantial marketing expertise, business development, and strategic advice during the crucial early stages of TechFlow. Without her contributions, the company might never have reached the valuation that led to the Google acquisition. Sophia leaned forward. Mr. Harrison, I'm not trying to be greedy. I know Mike is gone, and I know you're grieving. But I gave 3 years of my life to supporting his dream. I introduced him to investors, helped him refine his pitch, provided marketing strategies that directly led to TechFlow's success. I'm not asking for half. I'm asking for what's fair. And what do you consider fair? Margaret asked, her voice steady but cold. 20%, $10 million. The number sat on the table like a live grenade. $10 million, more money than 3 generations of Harrisons had ever seen combined. I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, photos, business plans covered in handwritten notes. Sophia had come prepared. These emails show extensive collaboration between my client and the deceased, Sinclair continued. Marketing strategies, investor introductions, business development advice. This isn't a case of someone trying to profit from tragedy. This is about recognizing contributions that were essential to TechFlow's success. I studied the documents. They were legitimate. I could see Mike's writing, his email signature, but something about the presentation bothered me. It felt too polished, too prepared, like a case that had been building long before Mike's death. When did you put this together? I asked Sophia directly. She blinked. I'm sorry? This folder, these documents, when did you compile them? Sinclair started to object, but I held up my hand. I'm asking Sophia. She looked uncomfortable for the first time since we'd sat down. I kept records of our collaboration. When Mike became successful, I thought it was important to document my contributions. While you were still engaged to him? Business is business, Mr. Harrison. Even when you're in love, you have to protect yourself. And there it was, the thing that had been bothering me. Sophia hadn't compiled this evidence out of grief or righteous indignation. She'd been building a case against Mike while they were still together, while she was still wearing his ring and planning their wedding. We'll need time to review this, I said, closing the folder. Sinclair nodded. Of course. But I should mention that we're prepared to file suit if necessary. My client has been more than patient. Mike had been dead for 3 weeks. Chapter 6. The backstory unfolds. Back in our hotel room, a modest Holiday Inn that felt right for folks from DeKalb County, Margaret and I spread the documents across the bed like pieces of a puzzle we didn't want to solve. The story they told was more complex than I'd wanted to believe. Sophia hadn't been just a girlfriend along for the ride. The emails showed genuine collaboration, detailed marketing analyses, investor contact lists, strategic advice that had clearly influenced Mike's decisions. But the more I read, the more disturbed I became. The documentation was too thorough, too strategic. These weren't the casual exchanges of a couple building a life together. They were the careful records of someone protecting her interests. Look at this, Margaret said, holding up a printed email from 18 months ago. She's asking Mike to put their agreement in writing. He writes back that he doesn't want to complicate their relationship with business formalities. I read Mike's response. Soph, we're going to be married. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. Why do we need contracts between us? I love you, and I trust you completely. My son's trusting nature had always been both his greatest strength and his biggest weakness. Even as a kid, he'd believed the best in people, sometimes to his detriment. She pushed him to formalize their business relationship multiple times, Margaret continued, reading through more emails. And every time, he deflected. He wanted to keep business and love separate. But she didn't, I said, the picture becoming clearer. She was thinking like a business partner while he was thinking like a fiancé. My phone rang. David Park. Mr. Harrison, I've been thinking about our conversation. There's something else you should know about Sophia. What? After she and Mike broke up, she started dating another tech entrepreneur, Marcus Webb, the guy who founded CloudSync. Word around Silicon Valley is that she's positioning herself the same way with him that she did with Mike. Networking, advice, making herself indispensable. I felt a chill. You think this is a pattern? I think Sophia is smart and ambitious, and she's figured out how to monetize relationships with successful men. That doesn't necessarily make her wrong about contributing to Mike's success, but it does make her motivations suspect. After David hung up, I sat in the hotel room's uncomfortable chair, watching the Los Angeles traffic crawl past 17 floors below. Margaret was quiet, reading more emails. "What are you thinking?" I asked her. "I'm thinking our son was brilliant with computers and naive about people," she said. "And I'm thinking this woman saw an opportunity and took it." But even as I agreed with her, I couldn't shake the evidence in front of us. Sophia had contributed to TechFlow's success. The question was whether that contribution entitled her to millions of dollars from Mike's estate. Chapter 7. The Deeper Investigation. The next morning, I did something that would have made Mike proud. I approached the problem like an engineer. I started gathering data. First, I called Mike's business partner and co-founder, Jason Torres. Jason had handled the technical side while Mike focused on business development. If anyone knew the truth about Sophia's contributions, it would be him. "Mr. Harrison, I'm so sorry about Mike," Jason said when I reached him at his new office in Palo Alto. "He was the best business mind I ever worked with." "Jason, I need to ask you about Sophia Chen. She's claiming she helped build TechFlow and deserves part of Mike's estate." A long pause. "This is awkward, Mr. Harrison. I don't want to speak ill of the dead or get involved in legal disputes. I'm not asking you to get involved. I'm asking for the truth." The truth is complicated. Sophia was definitely around during the early days. She sat in on strategy meetings, gave marketing advice, made introductions. She has an MBA from Stanford, and she's genuinely smart about business. My heart sank. So she did contribute? She contributed ideas, sure, but Mr. Harrison, lots of people contributed ideas. Mike's professor at Northwestern gave him the initial concept. I wrote all the code. Mike's freshman year roommate designed our original logo. Mike's uncle, your brother, loaned us $5,000 to buy our first servers. Should they all get a piece of the acquisition money? That was a good point. Mike's uncle Robert had indeed helped in the early days, never expecting anything in return except maybe dinner at Christmas. "The difference," Jason continued, "is that Sophia acted like she was entitled to formal recognition. She wanted her name on incorporation documents, wanted an official title, wanted equity. Mike always refused because she wasn't actually doing the day-to-day work." What kind of day-to-day work? Code, mostly. And business development. The actual calls, the actual meetings, the actual grunt work of building a company. Sophia was more like a consultant. A very well-connected, very smart consultant, but not a co-founder. That evening, I called my brother Robert, who'd run his own small manufacturing business for 20 years before retiring. "Bobby, you remember lending Mike money for his computer startup?" "Of course. $5,000. Kid paid me back with interest within 6 months. Why?" "His ex-girlfriend is claiming she's entitled to part of his estate because she helped with the business." Robert was quiet for a moment. "You know, Frank, I've seen this before. Not on this scale, but I've seen it. Someone contributes a little bit to someone else's success, then tries to claim a big piece when the payoff comes. It's human nature, I guess." "But she did help him, Bobby. I've seen the evidence." "I'm sure she did. Question is, did she help him because she loved him or because she saw an opportunity? And more importantly, what would Mike want?" That was the question that kept me awake that night. What would Mike want? Chapter 8. Sophia's Side. Despite my growing resentment, I agreed to meet with Sophia alone. She suggested a coffee shop in Santa Monica, the kind of trendy place with exposed brick walls and baristas who looked like aspiring actors. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open and papers spread around her. Even in casual clothes, jeans and a Northwestern sweatshirt that probably belonged to Mike, she looked like she was conducting business. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I know this is difficult." Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. She closed her laptop and leaned back. "Mr. Harrison, I want you to understand something. I'm not a gold digger. I'm not some opportunist trying to profit from tragedy. I genuinely loved Mike, and I genuinely contributed to his success. But you documented everything. While you were engaged to him, you were building a legal case." Her composure cracked slightly. "You think that was easy for me? You think I wanted to protect myself against the man I loved? But I'd seen what happened to other women in Silicon Valley, women who contributed to companies, who helped build successes, only to be written out of the story when it came time to cash in." I sipped my coffee, overpriced but admittedly good. "Tell me about the breakup." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Pacific Coast Highway. Mike changed after the acquisition talks started getting serious. He became secretive, protective. It was like he didn't trust me anymore. Or maybe he finally saw what you were really after. What I was really after. Her voice rose slightly, then she caught herself and lowered it. "Mr. Harrison, I was after a future with your son. A life where we were partners in everything, not just romance. I wanted us to build something together. But when he wouldn't make you an official business partner, you left him. When he wouldn't acknowledge my contributions, yes, I left him. I wasn't asking for charity. I was asking for recognition of work I'd actually done." I studied her face. She was pretty in that polished, professional way that seemed common among ambitious young women in California. But there was something harder underneath, something calculating. "Let me ask you something, Sophia. If Mike hadn't become successful, if TechFlow had failed, would you have stayed with him?" She met my eyes directly. If Mike had failed, it wouldn't have been because he didn't work hard enough or wasn't smart enough. It would have been because he didn't listen to good advice or didn't take advantage of opportunities. And honestly, Mr. Harrison, I'm not sure I could have spent my life with someone who sabotaged his own success. The honesty was brutal and revealing. In her mind, love was conditional on achievement. Mike had been right to end their engagement. Chapter 9. The Pressure Campaign. Over the next 2 weeks, Sophia's legal pressure intensified. Her lawyer filed preliminary motions in California court, arguing for an injunction to prevent us from transferring any of Mike's assets until her claim could be heard. The stress was getting to Margaret. She'd lost 15 pounds since Mike's death, and now she was barely sleeping, jumping every time the phone rang or someone knocked on our door. "Maybe we should just give her something," she said one evening as we sat in our living room, surrounded by sympathy cards and casserole dishes from neighbors. "Maybe $1 million just to make this go away." I understood the temptation. $1 million was still an unimaginable fortune to us, more than enough to pay off our mortgage, help our daughter Jennifer with her student loans, maybe take that trip to Ireland we'd always talked about. But it was the principle of the thing. Mike had made his choice about how to distribute his wealth. Who were we to second-guess that decision? "She's not going to stop at $1 million, I said. "This woman sees opportunity and she's going to push until she gets everything she thinks she can get." My phone rang. Jennifer, calling from her apartment in Minneapolis, where she was finishing her master's degree in social work. "Dad, I've been thinking about this Sophia situation." "What about it?" I looked her up online. She's got a LinkedIn profile that's been updated 3 times since Mike died. She's describing herself as a co-founder and marketing strategist for TechFlow Solutions. My blood began to boil. She's rewriting history in real time. "Gets worse, Dad. I found an interview she gave to a startup magazine last week. She's positioning herself as an expert on women's contributions to tech success stories. She's literally using Mike's death to build her own brand." I felt sick. This wasn't about justice or fair compensation. This was about opportunism, pure and simple. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "I reached out to some people who knew them both. Turns out Sophia has been telling people for months that she was basically a co-founder of TechFlow, that Mike couldn't have succeeded without her. She's been building this narrative long before he died." After hanging up, I sat in my workshop again, this time not even pretending to work on the tractor. The familiar smells of motor oil and metal shavings usually calmed me. But tonight they just reminded me of how far I was from home, how far out of my depth I was in this world of tech fortunes and legal maneuvering. Chapter 10. The Counteroffer. 2 days later, Sophia called again. This time, her tone was different, less adversarial, more businesslike. "Mr. Harrison, I've been thinking about our conversation. I want to make a proposal." "I'm listening." $7 million. We settle out of court, sign non-disclosure agreements, and move on with our lives. $7 million. She'd come down from 10, but it was still an astronomical sum. "Why should we pay you anything?" "Because if this goes to court, it's going to be expensive and ugly for everyone. Your son's private life will be dissected in public. Business emails will be made public record. The media will get involved. Tech millionaire's mysterious death, grieving parents, ambitious ex-fiancé. Is that really what you want Mike's legacy to be?" The threat was subtle, but clear. She was prepared to drag Mike's name through the mud if we didn't pay up. "And if we don't agree to your proposal?" "Then my lawyer files suit next week, and we let a jury decide what my 3 years with Mike were worth. Juries can be unpredictable, Mr. Harrison. They might decide I deserve more than $7 million. They might decide I deserve nothing. But either way, the process will cost you hundreds of thousands in legal fees and months of bad publicity." I thought about Mike, about the quiet, determined boy who'd built robots in our garage and dreamed of changing the world. He'd have hated this, the legal maneuvering, the threat of public spectacle, the reduction of his life's work to a financial transaction. "I need to discuss this with my wife." "Of course. But Mr. Harrison, I won't wait forever. Other opportunities are presenting themselves." Other opportunities. Even in death, Mike was just another opportunity to Sophia Chen. Chapter 11. Family Council. That night, Margaret, Jennifer, and I had a family conference call. Jennifer was driving down from Minneapolis to be with us, but we couldn't wait for her arrival to discuss Sophia's latest demand. $7 million, Margaret repeated, like she was trying to make the number make sense. That's more money than our entire family has ever seen. It's also money that Mike specifically didn't leave to her, I pointed out. If he'd wanted Sophia to have $7 million, he could have put it in his will. Jennifer's voice came through the phone speaker in our hotel room. "Dad, I've been doing more research. I found some of Mike's old college friends who knew them both. The picture they paint, it's not pretty." "What do you mean?" Sophia was already talking about Mike's potential when they first started dating. She specifically sought him out after he won that entrepreneurship competition senior year. Several people said she seemed more interested in his prospects than in him as a person. Margaret made a disgusted sound. She was hunting for a provider. "It gets worse," Jennifer continued. "I found social media posts from when they first got engaged. Sophia's Instagram is full of pictures from expensive restaurants, designer clothes, jewelry. She was living way above her own means, clearly expecting Mike to support a lifestyle she couldn't afford herself." I thought about Mike's own social media, which had been sparse and mostly focused on TechFlow's progress. He'd never been materialistic, never cared much about status symbols. Even after becoming successful, he'd driven a used Toyota and lived in a modest apartment. "But we still haven't answered the key question," I said. "Did she actually contribute to TechFlow's success?" "I talked to Jason Torres about that," Jennifer said. "He told me something interesting. Sophia's marketing advice. Most of it came from a consulting firm her father hired for his electronics business. She was basically passing along strategies that someone else had developed." Margaret looked up from the papers. So she was taking credit for other people's work? Sounds like it. And the investor introductions? Those came through her family connections, not her own business network. Her contribution was access, not expertise. I felt something shift inside me, a hardening of resolve that reminded me of my own father's stubborn streak. She used Mike. She used her family's connections to position herself as indispensable, then tried to parlay that into permanent financial security. The question is, Jennifer said, are we prepared to fight her in court? Chapter 12, The Silicon Valley Ecosystem. To better understand what we were dealing with, I decided to learn more about Silicon Valley culture. I spent the next day visiting TechFlow's old office space in Palo Alto and talking to other entrepreneurs who'd known Mike. The startup world, I discovered, was like a small town in some ways. Everyone knew everyone, and reputations mattered. Mike had been well respected, seen as ethical, innovative, and genuine in a world where those qualities weren't always common. Sophia, on the other hand, had a more complicated reputation. She's smart, admitted Lisa Chang, a venture capitalist who'd invested in several companies Mike had recommended. But she's also strategic about her relationships. In Silicon Valley, we call people like that founder hunters. Founder hunters? People who specifically target promising entrepreneurs, usually during the early, vulnerable stages of building a company. They provide support and advice, make themselves indispensable, then expect to be rewarded when the company succeeds. We were sitting in a coffee shop near Stanford University, the kind of place where half the customers seem to be discussing funding rounds and IPO strategies. Is that necessarily wrong? I asked. Lisa considered the question. Not inherently. Good advisors deserve compensation. But the ethical ones formalize those relationships up front. Contracts, equity agreements, clear expectations. The problematic ones use personal relationships to create ambiguous obligations. Which category does Sophia fall into? Based on what I've heard, she blurred the lines deliberately. She provided real value, I won't deny that, but she also leveraged her romantic relationship with Mike to avoid the normal business formalities that would have defined her role and compensation. I met with 3 other entrepreneurs that day, all of whom knew both Mike and Sophia. The picture that emerged was consistent. Sophia was talented and had genuinely helped Mike, but she'd also been calculating about positioning herself for financial gain. One story particularly stuck with me. According to Tom Chen, no relation to Sophia, another Northwestern graduate who'd known them both, Sophia had once bragged at a party that she was dating the next Mark Zuckerberg and that she was going to be set for life. She said it like it was an investment strategy, Tom told me. Not like she was talking about the man she loved.